It really is such a pleasure to be here. I've never been to Verona before, but I have got to say that of the two cuisines in the world, which I think I could eat every day for the rest of my life, Italian is one of them. And already I have been able to sample some lovely Italian food last night. But that's actually not what I'm here to talk about. I'm talking about a new Nuxt. And as I said, I'm really, really pleased to be able to do that here today. Just to introduce myself, I lead the Nuxt team. Who here has heard of Nuxt, by the way? I just want to check. Okay, you've heard of Nuxt, that's great. I don't know, so you really, really can't assume because there are entirely different worlds in the JavaScript community. And so I've been to conferences where people are like, Vue? Is that another framework? So anyway. But I also contribute to other projects too. I'm a full-time open source maintainer. So do check out some of these things. I'm a fan of magic regex, which is a different way of writing regular expressions, which is fully type safe and compiles away to normal regular expressions at build time, and cross-framework. Fontaine helps reduce cumulative layout shift if you have a custom web font. It's also cross-framework, and so you can check those out. And there are a few other things too, like a client for Mastodon called Elk. If you don't know Mastodon, it's the free decentralized Twitter. Yes, Elk, absolutely. I didn't know there would be any Elk fans, but that's... if you want to find out your first commit on GitHub, sorry, Natalia, firstcommit.is will tell you, and we'll add GitHub support. I feel already her eyes boring into me right now. And there are a couple of other things there too. I put my contact details because if there's anything I say today that you have questions about or any way I can help you, I would love to hear from you. So you can email me or send me a Discord message or a Twitter DM or a Mastodon message, and I would be delighted to help. This is where I normally am. I live in the UK, in the northeast, on the banks of a river, just in the shadow of a hill and an ancient wood, in the middle of the countryside, in a very, very old city. Probably not as old as Verona, but dating back to about 1000 AD. And I have one of my 3 cats is probably there. This cat, by the way, before we adopted her, her previous owners called her Hitler, which I feel was unfair. She's a very, very sweet cat. So if you message me, I'll probably be sitting here. And I want to talk a little bit first, to start with, the road to Nuxt 3. Nuxt 3 was some time in the making. Who here was annoyed at how long it took to come? I understand that. You shouldn't feel guilty about feeling annoyed. I was annoyed, and I'm not sure we did everything right in the road to Nuxt 3. So Nuxt 2 was there, it was doing well, and then Vue 3 came along, and Vue 3 was completely breaking change in terms of how it worked and how Nuxt would have to work. So we had to rewrite it. And we actually took the opportunity to rewrite not just the Vue bit, but also the server. We created a completely new server. We actually created an entirely new ecosystem called Unjs, which has lots of packages that are fully extracted from Nuxt and can be used and are used by other frameworks, and even on their own in other projects. And then we also, while we were doing this, Evan wrote this thing called Vite, which we were already coping with a breaking change from Webpack 4 to Webpack 5, but now there's an entirely different bundler that is fast and pretty cool. We wanted to support that too. So we actually had to rewrite our bundling internals so that they would be fully decentralized and can be dropped. You can have any bundler with Nuxt 3. You can drop an RS pack or parcel if we can get the plugin infrastructure working. It's all compatible. So we did a huge, huge rewrite. I'm not sure there's a line of code that's the same. And so it was a tricky road. Here are 4 points of learning that I would take from it. The first is, as any agency worker or owner knows, I worked in an agency before doing what I'm doing now. I had an agency and then I had a SaaS startup. you have two things. You have the scope of a project, and you have the time, the deadline required to deliver that, and you can't flex. If you can flex on one of them, but not both. You can't keep both fixed. And so I think probably the scope of Nuxt, we wanted the scope, and so the time just kept increasing. And maybe that's something that we don't want to do in future. In fact, it's one of the things that I've set out for our vision for going forward in Nuxt, is that we are going to stick to time. So we have weekly patch releases-ish, monthly minors-ish, yearly majors. So you will expect a Nuxt 4 in 2024 without the significant changes from Nuxt 2 to Nuxt 3. But that's one learning. The second is the importance of the ecosystem, because one of the things that I think makes Nuxt special, and if you haven't experienced it, the modules ecosystem and the ecosystem of library authors writing code, writing libraries that are then used. And actually this transition from Vue 2 to Vue 3, from Nuxt 2 to Nuxt 3, took a lot longer than we were expecting. So the Vue transition was big, the Nuxt transition was big, and then everything else depending on those took its own period of time. And actually, we never want to see that waterfall effect again. So future updates, one of the things we're doing with Nuxt is we're using Nuxt Kit, which is an SDK for building on Nuxt. So when we do make changes, even if it's a breaking change that might mean you have to change something in your project, it shouldn't mean that the libraries that you're using or the modules that you're using have to also be completely rewritten. They should just be able to depend on the newer version of the SDK. And this is the third point, and that is by exposing our internals in terms of how Nuxt was written, we made it harder for ecosystem authors to keep up with changes to Nuxt. And again, that's something we want to abstract away as much as possible to enable users to do things that are semantic. So add template or add plugin, rather than Nuxt options, plugins, unshift, plugin object with source and desk. We don't want that. We want it to be much more ergonomic. And finally, it was really hard to get people to contribute to Nuxt 3 because we were building it while and changing it significantly while we were building it. So how do you contribute to something for which there is no documentation? And there is no documentation because it isn't actually yet fixed what the API is going to be. Terrible. Don't do that. And so we don't want to be repairing a moving car. It's a bad way to go. But I don't want this to be, this isn't pessimistic, by the way. Nuxt 3 adoption has now overtaken Nuxt 2 adoption. We're seeing very, very happy things in terms of people using it and reporting good stories and success. And I'm really pleased with where we are right now and the contributions we're now getting from people in the community. But I would like to know whether you're using Nuxt 3 in production, in development, or not yet. I say optimistically. And this hopefully is going to work. This should be some WebSocket connections to, yeah, okay, it's the numbers are coming in. I'm using SlideDev, by the way. If you haven't come across it, sli.dev, it allows you to write your slides in Markdown and Vue. And so you can do things like just drop a little component that requires a WebSocket connection into your slide deck. Or you can even have a code block that actually lets you live edit a Vue component that actually you display on the slide. It's amazing. Anthony Fu, who's actually on the Nuxt team as well, wrote it, and it's just amazing. Okay, well, I think this is really good. This is really good because there are some people here who haven't used it yet, and I want to convince you to use it. I'm not going to dive into all the details, but hopefully I'll be able to give you some flavor of why you should definitely be using Nuxt 3. And if you are using it, I would love to hear how it's going for you. So do come and grab me. So one of the things that we've put in place is Nuxt Bridge. So the vision for Nuxt Bridge is that for people who are on Nuxt 2, they should be able to have a way of migrating to Nuxt 3. So Vue 2 hits its end of life at the end of this year. So that is December, end of December, which is ridiculously soon if you're still on a Vue 2 project. And there are end-of-life support providers out there. But our aim is to provide something that lets you gradually move from the options API to composables and the new runtime API of Nuxt 3, to adopt Vite even when you're on Nuxt 2, to adopt Nitro, which is the new server engine even when you're on Nuxt 2, and the new head metadata support on Nuxt 2. And all of those are significant changes, so I don't want to suggest that Bridge is a magical thing that's going to just solve everything for you, but we are hoping to allow you to granularly opt in to some of these things, if that's right for your project, because I would love to see people migrating, and for us as the team to make it easy for people to migrate Vue 2 projects to Vue 3, if it's a project that you're maintaining and want to continue even after the end of life for Vue 2. We did take the decision earlier this year to move the Nuxt to end of life, not to the same time as Vue, but to the end of June in next year, because Bridge has taken a while to get going, and we're just about to make a release, and we want to give people time. So there is that. Sorry to ask you another question. Will you use it? Is this something that, if you're using Nuxt 2, would you use Bridge? I'm just sort of curious in terms of it's always a tricky thing to know how to spend time as a team. We're quite small. A lot of us do this outside. We're not full-time open source, and we do things outside of our day jobs, and so it's figuring out to prioritize Nuxt 3 development or Bridge. Okay, well, I think that's a pretty clear answer. Our aim is to balance stability with innovation. And thinking first on the point of view of stability, I mentioned the new release schedule of keeping the scope, the time, fixed, so that there's not too long between releases, and there's not the sort of build-up of potential breaking changes, so people can test things out and adopt them early. We have nightly releases, which are actually per commit, so slightly inaccurately, but Edge was worse. Nuxt Edge was worse because that gave the idea that it was running in some CDN somewhere. We have our release schedule, and we also have adopted the ecosystem CI pattern, which Vite initially created and is now being adopted by lots of projects, including Vue, NX, lots of projects. And that means before new releases, I'm able to test to see whether the new Nuxt release is going to break any tests for any of these downstream projects, depending on Nuxt, which is a huge thing for stability for Nuxt itself. And that gives me confidence, and us confidence as the team, to build and ship a lot of interesting things. So we can do things like ship Vue Transitions API support, which we did back in April this year, just a few weeks after they were available. Automatic reload and state restoration. If your app detects that there is a new version available on the server, it can save its state, reload, and pull in the new state. You do have to enable that as an experimental feature. We have 0 JavaScript and 0 Vue runtime versions. If you want something that's an MPA, that's very easy. It's a single flag, and you get that. We have inline root rules, so you can, for example, go into one of your pages and say, this page should be pre-rendered, or into a different page and say, I want this to be client-side only. Rather than needing to configure something at a global level or working with something that might be more complex, you can just do it very granularly. Server components, and Julien, who is doing amazing work on this, I think is going to be giving a lightning talk later today, so definitely show up for that. And many more experimental options. And the idea is that we should be able to do these two things together with our sort of fixed release schedule and with our testing. So this is where we're going to go. We're going to continue collaborating with Ecosystem CI and actually work together with some other projects to see if we can improve things in general. So maybe create a standalone CLI or enable private projects to run a GitHub action on a scheduled basis that will tell you that your code is going to work on the latest nightly version of Nuxt. If you're maintaining an open source project like a library or something else and you maintain a Nuxt integration, you can submit a PR to Ecosystem CI. I would love to test it before new releases. And that means you'll either get pinged by me before a release saying, hey, let's fix this, or you'll know that it will just work with the latest version of Nuxt. We're going to migrate our current experimental namespace where we deploy a lot of these new features disabled by default. We're keeping experimental for things that are truly experimental, but some things we're pretty convinced about are going to be defaults in future. We're going to move into the future namespace. And others, which might be things you would want control over, switching on and off, will keep in the features namespace. So you can expect to see that in Nuxt 3.9, which should come at the end of this month-ish. We're also working on Nuxt telemetry, and we're taking sort of information from, by the way, it's opt-in, so this isn't by default. But we're working on getting information on things like what dev tools people are using, or what features that we're building into Nuxt are actually being used, because it's difficult to know how to prioritize. And it is always great when people tell me, when there's any kind of feedback, that is wonderful. But sometimes you don't have the time, and so telemetry is helpful for that. It's by the way, totally anonymous, just aggregate information. This is like a screenshot of what we get. Like this is DevTools showing us how many people are looking at the modules page, or how many people are looking at the components page. And we'll be opening up actual stats so you can see them yourself just as easily as we can. The aim is that we are minimal by default. This was, I think, an ecosystem change moving from Vue 2 to Vue 3, because with composable architecture, you import what you need and only that. So you don't have to import some global singleton with everything included. You actually only need certain things. And so when you move from an options API to a composition API model from Vue 2 to Vue 3, you get the benefits of this automatically, and your builds will become smaller by default because only the features you require are there. And we've really been leaning into this with Nuxt in terms of what we are building in by default and what we're making available. So all of our utilities being auto-imported, it's not that they are globally registered, they're only included in your build if you use them. And the same is true with a lot of other things that we want to create. We want things to be minimal. We want you to be able to ship the lightest weight possible website. But as you need more features, it shouldn't require any extra friction for you to access them. And so we're leaning into things like server components with interactivity, deep interactivity, which is, by the way, so cool. Can I not just say this is extremely cool? But multi-app support, so a Nuxt answer to micro frontends or module federation. Build optimizations. As much as possible, we can move things out of runtime code and to build, so that, again, things are faster for you. And deep integrations with serverless platforms like Dino or Legon or Cloudflare Workers and Pages and others. 3.8 is our latest minor, and it features things like being able to add new modules from the command line. It will download, install the dependencies, add it to your Nuxt config, and make any other changes that are needed. DevTools are now built in. We have an app manifest that will manage things like, is a page pre-rendered? Do we have access to static data for this page or not? And we also support some root rules, server rules, but on the client side, like redirects. You can now cache your data fetching strategies and lots more. Our focus going forward, though, we want to be focusing on developer experience. So the new Nuxt CLI, it's been pulled out from the main Nuxt core repository, and it's now on a separate release schedule, so it can be really fixing bugs, building new things, and shipping much faster. We have DevTools, which I hope you've used. If you haven't, click that little green icon at the bottom of your screen when you're developing in Nuxt 3 and just explore around. It has so many amazing features. And Anthony, who's responsible for that. And a plug for Nuxter, which is a VS Code extension, which aims to do the same kind of thing in your IDE. Going forward, Nuxt test utils. So we want to build a first-class testing story for Nuxt. We've already extracted it now from the core repository, and we'll be combining it with unit testing with Nuxt vtest, and particularly working with Vladimir in the vtest ecosystem. Nuxt content with a HAD is aiming to make content easy for Vue developers. And here's a sneak peek of where we're going with Nuxt core. We want to make it possible for you to use MDC, which is like MDX, but for Vue, built in. So be able to have pages that just work in Markdown and components and other things like that. Nuxt image. We've released version 1 of Nuxt image powered by IPX version 2, which allows you, I think we have over 23, 25 now providers that allow you to use image transformation services to just transform images and automatically optimize them for you in a build. It's as simple as this kind of thing. And just to give you a quick demo, we now auto-install in new projects. So if I were to create a new Nuxt project, I'm going to use bun just for fun. This is the new Nuxt CLI, Nuxy. And so this is a little bit about what it looks like and feels like to create a new Nuxt project. So here we go, we have a new Nuxt project. I'm just going to run the dev server. And that should, let's see if I get a browser window open. That should fire up a Nuxt welcome page. This is the auto install that I'm talking about for Nuxt image. We should be able to drop in, start using it straight away. And if I just save that, it's going to prompt me to install the image package, which I can go ahead and do from the CLI. And it's going to take that image package, install it, add it in my Nuxt config file for me, and restart, so I have Nuxt image working out of the box. And that's the kind of thing that we want to sort of just remove friction as much as possible. So if you're reading the docs and you see something about Nuxt image, you can just go ahead and use it without having to remember all the steps to set it up. There's been a UI library explosion as well over the last few weeks and months. Here are some of the many. You can check them out at nuxt.com/modules. So there are lots of options for starting a new Nuxt project if that's what you want to use, apart from the things like Tailwind or Uno CSS that are more lower level. We always want Nuxt to have best practice built in so that you don't have to reinvent things or rework out what is best to do. So we've launched, here are some new things that we're working on. These are not released yet. Nuxt accessibility. Anthony and I are working on making accessibility auditing built into Nuxt. Nuxt auth. Sebastian and Puya are working on that. Sebastian actually just released an experimental module which is called Nuxt auth utils. Check it out. It has built-in OAuth and some other things too, and is the first step towards this. Nuxt assets and scripts enable you not to have to reinvent the wheel when it comes to adding third-party scripts, or using assets which might be proxied or or might be remote, but you need them to be part of your build. And Nuxt fonts aims to make it aims to mean that you can add any font, Google, Adobe, anything, without needing any special configuration. It just works in a Nuxt project. And I know I've been zooming over these really quickly, but I want just to ask you again, of all the things that I've been talking about, what are you looking forward to using the most? The accessibility module, the auth module, scripts, fonts, UI, the Nuxt UI, did I say that? We have a built-in like Nuxt UI library you can use if you want. Nuxt image, Nuxt content. And I promise I won't be cutting any of these projects just if they don't get enough votes. That would be interesting, yes. Community-driven prioritization. We're going to axe for project live. Okay. Nuxt auth. I've got to say, the aim for Nuxt auth, by the way, is that it's going to be a low-level module that provides utilities and infrastructure, which you can use or other modules can use. So the aim is not that this makes other authentication modules, which we have lots of, by the way, already in Nuxt 3, obsolete, but that it enables shared best practice across them. Great, thank you. And one of the things that I want Nuxt to focus on, and I think has been something that I recognized about actually the Vue and Nuxt communities, is that they are very welcoming. I don't know if this is shared by everyone. If it's not, I'm sorry. But my experience has definitely been that it is welcoming, and it's something that I think we want to aspirationally make true as well. And so I want that to be true of Nuxt. We've just launched a new website, nuxt.com, which we have some plans for. We want to make it easier for you to be able to access API syntax that's up to date with the current version of Nuxt and is synced across the code. To actually translate things automatically using AI and human translators who will, aiming to make their life easier, not replace them. Having a team page, having a, I have not said this before, but we want to have you to have your own sort of profile page that you can track things and save modules that you use and things like that. Discord and GitHub remain the places to go for help and contribution, collaboration, if you want to do that. Do check it out at chat.nuxt.dev or discord.nuxtjs.org are both places you can go to if you want to join Discord. And we want to recognize all the contributions that people in the community make, because Nuxt is honestly, I've said this before, like already today, but Nuxt is nothing without the community. And I think one of the things that makes Nuxt so nice to use is the fact that actually everything is exposed. So you can build your own module that completely changes what Nuxt does. And it actually means that it's not this sort of centralized, we are controlling everything, everything is coming from the team. But it's actually a community project. And things start as modules, and then maybe they're made part of the core because they're great and the community recognizes that. But if you go to nuxters.nuxt.com and you've submitted a pull request or an issue with comments or a comment itself that lots of people have given some reaction to, then you'll get a badge on Discord. So yay, you can get that. That's fun. I built that in a weekend, and then the rest of the team were like, this doesn't look so good, and they redesigned it. And I am a little bit bitter about that, because I thought I did a pretty good job, but anyway, they redesigned it. So it's better now, it is. I'm not that bitter. Just a little bit. This is another thing that I would love to say, which is that if there's anything that is holding you back from contributing, if you want to contribute either to Nuxt or to open source, but you feel like when you look at the people already involved, you don't look like them or feel like them, or you don't think you would be welcome, or anything like that, I would genuinely love to hear from you. And if you go to my website at row.dev, and my blog, I have a blog article called An Open Invitation. You can click it, and there's a link to book a 10-minute meeting with me anytime, which I would genuinely love. So that will just show up in my diary, and we can have a chat about anything. So that is a real thing, by the way. So there's another article on contributing to Nuxt and how you might do that if you want to just dive in, which you can check out too. But I really want to see the Nuxt community stay what it has been for me, which is a place which is open and welcoming. And genuinely, the reason I would love to have these chats is sometimes I just want to look somebody in the eyes and say, you are welcome here. And that is not something always that you can communicate just in text or just by saying it. So please book it. Here are some things that we are going to do in the future. What is Nuxt 4 going to offer? Not massive breaking changes. Now, a major version always involves breaking changes, right? That's the point of the major. That's things that involve changes to default behaviors. That's a breaking change. But a breaking change doesn't mean a difficult change or something which it's hard. You can always opt out of it, for example. Maybe we change the default, but you can still set a flag to enable alt behavior. So our priorities for Nuxt 4 are improving developer experience, because in my mind, by the way, this is not like icing on a cake or added extra for, it makes it a little bit nicer, you know, it's nice to use. Developer experience for me is the thing which enables me to stay in a flow state, to be productive, to write better code, to do it faster, not to have to cut corners, to be able to deliver a project, for example, which has great accessibility built in, because I've been able to stay in that flow state and actually work on it all the way through, rather than rushed off my feet and have to deliver to a deadline without key features included. Like, developer experience is really important for that, and so we want to prioritize that. So reducing that friction, context switching, etc. We want to focus on performance, both of the Nuxt dev server, like your experience in development, and also in production, the challenge always for frameworks is how can we do that because a lot of performance is actually not the framework code, it's the code that the user writes at the end of the day. So how can we make it possible for people to opt into, for the path to good performant code to be as simple and smooth and gentle as possible, as well as making sure that everything that we actually do from the framework point of view is performant and fast and blazingly fast. And so that's a joke. That's framework hype. But yeah, that's what we want. We want it to feel really fast and to be fast. But next for we want to be opt-in. We want a general pattern of how we add new features to be opt-in and then disableable. So you don't have to participate in sort of direction. And we want it to be collaborative and open. So it's not like we are, ruling with a rod of iron or something like that. Like, please submit RFCs and ideas and GitHub issues. That's how we get better. A final thing, thank you, from the whole team. There are quite a lot of people involved in making Nuxt what it is on the team and also outside and beyond the team and in the community. But here are a few of the faces that you might know from GitHub. Some of whom are here today. So thank you very much. It makes Nuxt.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, any question? Not yet. Okay. I'm reading a couple of questions from the people who are watching online. Let's do. Okay. It's a long question, so maybe. Is the static generation working in Nuxt 3 well as in Nuxt 2? Because I often experiment problem in generating real statistic HTML with all the content inside, especially with API calls that should happen server side. Can you share what's the best way to do that? We once used async data that was working perfectly, but now it's a little bit more tricky somehow, or I can also book those 10 minutes with you.
So static generation it should be working. So if it's not working for you, please raise an issue with a reproduction, because I would consider that a bug. In Nuxt 3, we offer things that are more granular. And the way we offer, so in Nuxt 2 we had something called full static, which was the idea that all of your API calls could be run at generate time. And so you wouldn't need to rerun any of these API calls at build time, like at runtime. And that is something we still offer in Nuxt 3, it's called payload extraction. So we take all of the async data calls, we take useFetch, and we bundle them into a payload JSON, which is generated and then fetched at runtime. And if the data is in that payload, it won't be refetched. One problem, though, I have noticed is that a lot of people think that so I'm just saying this, I've added it to the docs, I've like bolded it, and so a lot of people think that for a static website, you have to set SSR false. If you're doing that, please don't do that. That's not the same thing as a static website. What that means is that we'll generate pages for your website that have no content. And we won't extract any API calls because we are not doing anything on the server. We're not generating HTML. It means it's a pure SPA. It's a pure client-side rendered app. There's no server involvement at all. So you're opting out of a lot of features, and you won't get what you expect. We even print a warning on the CLI if you use it, and still people are raising issues with it. But no, we should do static payload extraction by default, particularly in 3.8. Now that we have our app manifest, it means we're able to tell whether a page has a payload associated with it. So you can have a hybrid site. Some pages are generated, some are not, and it should be able to fetch the payload for the ones that are generated and then perform fresh calls for the ones that are not.
Thank you. Any question here?
When the answer prompts more questions than the original question, you know it might have been a problem.
So I'm going to read another question from the people who are watching online. In your opinion, what's the best way to create a separate design system repo using Storybook, for instance, to be able to use it inside a Nuxt app? Is it actually a new Nuxt installation, since we will need special component from Nuxt, like Nuxt Link, or can it be something lighter?
So it depends on whether you're using built-in Nuxt components. You can even use them in a separate repo. I'd like to highlight first layers. So Nuxt has a facility called layers, which enables you to assemble multiple Nuxt applications into one. And we see this a lot with enterprises maintaining a separate layer for their UI components, which then gets used. That layer is then consumed in multiple apps. Or you might see this in an agency as well that has like certain API routes that they always use. So they have a layer with those API routes, and then that layer can be, other Nuxt apps can extend it. And so that it still produces a single app at the end of the day, but it basically merges them into one. So that's a very good way of creating UI libraries, which is like multiple Nuxt apps. If you need to, you can, there's a Storybook module that works with Nuxt, which has just been released from the Storybook team. There's a niggle, I think, with the latest version of Nuxt, but they're fixing that at the moment. But I would suggest that it enables you to use built-in Nuxt components and things like that in your UI library, and it should just work. But yeah, one of those options should work.
Thank you. Any question from people here? So don't be shy. Great.
So Nuxt 3 already has a great developer experience. What are the improvements you expect in Nuxt 4 on that side? Thank you.
Thank you.
So I would like to see more taken away from. So for example, when we ship a new feature or a new behavior, at the moment in our changelog we say, to disable this, you'll need to do this. Or to enable it, you'll need to do this. We should be able to do that for you. So Anthony Fu has created a library called Magic AST, where you can pronounce it Magiccast, which I was doing for a long time before realizing probably Magic AST is the more understandable version, but Magiccast is just so much more Harry Potter, right? And it enables you to basically make changes to JavaScript files just very, very intuitively. So check it out, it is magic. But we should be able to do things like, oh, let's change your Nuxt config in these ways. So not just adding a module to an array, but actually we can set properties and configure it for you and like run a migration script. So I think that would be quite a nice thing to start having true in our new releases. Just ask you a couple of questions and migrate your project to the new behavior, or opt you out of the new behavior if you want. So that I think would be quite nice. There are some other things that we have in mind in terms of compatibility and cross-dependency things, which we're already starting to ship. So at the moment, if you use Nuxt module add a module that is not compatible with Nuxt 3, it will tell you this module is actually not compatible with Nuxt 3. Are you sure you want to install it? And we can do things like that in terms of this module, relies on a feature that wasn't shipped until Nuxt 3 point whatever. And it can offer to upgrade your Nuxt installation. So things like that, which I hope will make people's life easier, is what I have in mind. But it's more of a vision, like a guiding star rather than a set of things.
We still have a few minutes. No questions? Okay, so we can give another round of applause to Daniel.